Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Exploring Idle Fees with Chargefox and Synergy for WA EV Network. My name is Steph, and I'm super excited to be here to keep us on track. Before we get moving, just a little bit of housekeeping. So this webinar is being recorded, and we'll be sending that to you after the webinar finishes. We'll keep the content at about 30 minutes. There'll be time for questions as well, but if there's no questions, we'll gauge that, but we can wrap up early. Drop any questions you have in the chat as we go, and we'll circle back to them after the content finishes. And like I said earlier, we'll send you an email with access to the content once we wrap up. Alrighty, so I'd love to hand it over to our two presenters. One of them is coming live from their own Tesla, which is super fitting. Matt, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Steph. Hi, everyone. My name's Matt. I'm one of the product managers here at Chargefox. I work with the team who largely focus on the driver experience on our platform, and my team was the team that built Idle Fees as part of this trial. Over to you, Sandra.
Hi, I'm Sandra Giri. I'm working for Synergy and particularly on the WAV network since 2021. And I'm the EV expert as well as the EV community and LGA liaison advisor on this project.
Awesome. And to clarify, Sandra's not driving while she's webinaring this morning. But thank you so much for joining, Sandra. It's so great to have a customer on the call to talk through your experience and share your insights. We're super grateful. Okay, so we've got a quick question for you all on the call. We'd love to hear more about what motivated you to join our webinar today. So if you can pop your answer in the chat, we want to make sure that we're covering what you care about today in the content and also at question time. So we'd love to hear from you. And I'll take you through the agenda while we get some of those posted. Cool. So in terms of the agenda, here is what we're talking through today. We'll be giving you an overview of the Idle Fees trial Chargefox ran with WA EV Network and Synergy. You'll hear about how we went about the trial and what impact it had on the WA EV network. So I'll hand over to Matt quickly to run through a poll.
Yeah, thanks, Steph. We have a poll for you today that we'd love you to drop your answers into. So you should see a poll on your screen momentarily. The question we want to ask you today is, do you feel that overstays are a problem at your sites? And we've got 4 different answers here. So A, yes, they're a current problem. B, not yet. We think there'll be a problem. C, no, I don't think it's a problem. Or D, maybe, I'm not sure it's a problem. Really keen to get a read of the room here and see what people think about this. We hear our own sort of feedback from our drivers and from our customers, and keen to get your feedback as well. And we'll leave the poll up for a few moments whilst you put in your answers.
Okay. So we've got a bit of yes, they're a current problem. A lot of not yet, but we think there'll be a problem. So a bit of future proofing and some not sure if they're a problem yet either. Actually, it's a perfect balance. Yeah, see the results on the screen now. Cool. And thanks for popping them in the chat as well. Alrighty, so most people don't think that it's not going to be a problem or feel like that won't be a problem. So, okay, great, cool. Matt, perhaps you can give us an overview on what idle fees are and how they work?
Yeah, absolutely. So in a sentence, to summarize what idle fees are, they're a per-minute additional charge that applies if a vehicle remains plugged in to the charger after the session has ended. And for some people on this call, I'm sure you're familiar with this concept. It's not a new thing. There's other networks, both in Australia and abroad, that have a concept of idle fees on their networks, most notably the Tesla Supercharger network. But this is the first time we've done something like this.
Awesome. And can you walk us through how idle fees actually work?
Sure. So I've done this little diagram here to represent how idle fees work. So one of the reasons why idle fees have been implemented across many different charging networks across the world is to address the concept of overstays. And we've used a simple diagram here to describe when idle fee time might apply. An overstay is typically defined as the period between when a charge session stops and when the vehicle is unplugged. And we'll sometimes use the term overstay and park time interchangeably because from a Chargefox perspective, park time and overstays are the same thing, the time between when the car stops receiving energy and when the car is unplugged. And we'll dive into a bit more detail around like how the actual trial is implemented on a later slide to kind of provide a bit more color to this diagram.
Awesome. Thanks for clarifying that, Matt. So now that we know what idle fees are and how they work, can you tell us a little bit about why Chargefox felt they were important to implement and invest in?
Absolutely. So as many of you probably know, our network is growing very rapidly, and the growth of EV sales is outpacing how quickly we can get plugged into the ground. So in the short to medium term, idle fees from a Chargefox perspective is a mechanism for us to future-proof our platform by ensuring that stations are available as drivers need them, especially at high traffic journey charges where drivers just want to top up and get on their way. The driver experience for my team and for Chargefox generally is really critical. We don't want chargers to have a bad time using stations on our network. So we wanted to respond to driver feedback we hear often around overstays being a problem. And I think there's an expectation from drivers for us to do what we can from a software perspective to make sure the charging experience is as frictionless as possible. And lastly, I think it was a really great opportunity to partner with Synergy, who have done extensive research into this problem, to work together to build and implement a beta version of idle fees that we could trial to gather data and see how effective it actually was in reducing and addressing overstays.
Got it. And I'm sure, Sandra, you had similar motivations to ours. So can you tell us a little bit about why idle fees were such a must-have for Synergy on the WA EV network?
Yeah, because of the scarcity of infrastructure in Western Australia, for us it was really primordial that we optimize our network. So idle fee seems to be the best tool to avoid the overstay and increase the turnover rate of our charging infrastructure. And also it allows to decrease the frustration when you arrive at a station and someone is not charging or have finished to charge and you are waiting to be able to charge. That can become very frustrating. So idle fee also provides a better customer experience. So for us, that was the main reason why we wanted to implement idle fee on the WAV network. And the second side of it is the educational side. As Matt just said, we have more EVs on the road than charging infrastructure. And so a lot of people that has an EV are not yet really used to driving an EV or how to use the chargers. So for us, the idle fee allowed to promote a sense of responsibility and encourage drivers to really practice good charging habits. So it's all about the right etiquette, I guess.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. And what about the trial itself? Why did we go down the route of doing a trial, Matt?
Yeah, it's a good question. You could ask the question, why not every station across our platform to start with? This is something drivers really want. And for us, we wanted to make sure that we built something that had the impact we wanted and we could measure, as this is something we'd never done before. It was a brand new feature. And to go back to the previous slide where we were talking about the experience for drivers, we wanted to make sure it was a great experience for our drivers, that we weren't bringing something onto our platform that would be a negative experience or reduce the overall experience to make it less pleasant for drivers to charge using one of the stations on the network. And we also didn't want to assume that what other networks had done, like Tesla, was going to be the right solution for us. Sure, there were certain aspects of it that we've used, such as the pricing model, as we'll touch on a bit later. But overall, Chargefox is its own platform, its own network. We've got customers with specific needs and unique drivers. So we wanted to make sure that what we built was built for that use case and not just recycling something from something else.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what was in scope for the trial?
Yep, so in scope for the trial, idle fees was initially deployed to around 10 DC stations on the WA EV network, which has since grown by a few stations as the WA EV has grown. Based on our own research as well as the input from Synergy, our idle fee pricing model was $1 per minute with a 10-minute grace period. And the 10-minute grace period we put in place predominantly because we didn't want idle fees to be a punishment for drivers. That wasn't the intention. the intention was to provide a disincentive to overstay and encourage them to move on. So we wanted to give people a chance to return to their vehicle, unplug, and leave. Additionally to that, we made some changes to our mobile app experience to support the trial. Most notably, we built in some push notifications when a driver finished charging and when 10 minutes elapsed to let them know the idle fees applied at that station and the idle fees are now in place. So that was a way to target mobile app users who were charging at one of those stations. We'd also show in the mobile app on the actual station and the plug itself that idle fees applied, so that if driver was navigating and starting a charge session from the mobile app, they'd also see on that specific station that idle fees applied as well.
But what about drivers who weren't using the app?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we do have drivers who use RFID cards, as many of you know, I'm sure. Over the past 4 weeks of the trial group stations, around 30% of sessions have started via RFID. So it's 1 in 3 sessions started by RFID card. And our primary method to do that was kind of using a sticker around the charging cable, which is something new to us. We've never really done anything like a cable sticker before. On the slide itself, you can see the design we used. And the intention of that was to ensure the drivers could, be notified about the idle fees applying at that particular plug, even if they didn't use a mobile app. So I saw that Rojan, you answered a question in the chat about information campaigns and signage. That was one way we used signage to communicate to drivers that idle fees applied at that station.
Sandra, perhaps you can give us a little bit more of an overview of the WA EV network. I think it's important for us and the audience to get a better understanding of the scale of the trial.
Yeah, sure. So this starting in 2021. It's a WA state government initiative, and they announced the Australia's longest EV charging network. It's about 18 to 98 chargers across 49 locations. So as you can see, it's all from the North Kununurra all the way to South Australia to Eucla and east to Kalgoorlie. You can see that this project is shared between Synergy and Horizon Power. Horizon Power looking after the regional area, and Synergy is the dark blue area. So as Matt said before, we are still in the process of installing chargers. You can see that there's a lot of green spot now, so a lot of live charging stations. But when we started in April 2023 was our first charger, and since then we have already 14 DC chargers installed in the Swiss, so in the Synergy service area. And we are expecting to have the network fully operational by end of Q1 2024.
Yeah, it's a huge endeavor, and we were super excited to be a part of it. I think now let's talk about the results. How did we measure success of the trial, Matt?
Yeah, thanks, Steph. So before I dive into any data, I just wanted to cover off some of the metrics we decided to track and redefine a few things we've talked about so far. So you remember from an earlier slide, we talked about this concept of overstays and park time being interchangeable, and the definition of those being charge sessions stopping and car unplugging are the two events that determine when park time and overstays are measured. And the goal of the trial was to reduce that overstay metric, so how long people were parking for after their charge session. And to measure that, what we did is we looked at how often drivers were overstaying as part of the trial group stations versus times where they didn't overstay. The second metric we tracked was around how long drivers were staying for, so median park time. And lastly, and Sandra will share some insights here too, but we wanted to work with drivers to understand how idle fees changed their charging experience, if at all, and whether it improved it or made it worse. So now we've covered the definitions, we can dive into some findings. So for the first metric, we had around overstays. Just to reiterate, for this particular metric, what we were looking at was, of all sessions, which of those are we observing drivers staying plugged in after they finish charging? And what we've observed over the trial period of the past few months is that park time as a percentage of sessions with overstays has reduced over time. So we've seen a consistently lower percentage of overstays at trial group stations relative to stations without idle fees. In some cases, we saw 6 to 7% decrease in overstays relative to the network average, which is a really great result. And to put that in kind of like layman's terms, the benefit for drivers and for customers to own stations is that during the time we've had this trial running, there's been less instances of people plugged into the charger after their charge session at trial group stations compared to other stations on our network.
Nice. And what about park time? What's happening on this graph here?
Yeah, so on this graph here, this is us tracking median park time. So when drivers overstay, how long are they overstaying for? So what we've observed here, and you can see this represented by the dark orange line, is that park time has almost exclusively been consistently lower than the network average for public DC stations. So to give you an idea, that first kind of really big orange bar is before we started the trial, and then you sort of can see over time that orange bar sitting consistently lower than the dark blue bar, which is the median park time average across the network. And what this means, again, in layman's terms, is that when drivers do overstay at trial group stations, they're very likely to unplug and move on before 10 minutes have actually even passed. So it's much lower than the network average, which is around 10 minutes across our public DC stations. And my interpretation of this data has been that although drivers aren't moving on immediately in every single case, although they are more likely to move on than not, they are moving more often than not in the first 10 minutes to avoid that additional idle fee charge. And similar to the first metric, the benefit to drivers in this case is that the station is becoming available sooner and they're not rocking up and finding someone plugged in and not charging.
And I think this is my favorite slide. So what are we seeing here, Matt? Oh, have a sip of water.
And a quick drink break, sorry. So as you know, and as Sandra kind of touched on that when going through the map of the WAEV network, network for WAEV network is growing very fast. We've seen a 3 times growth in sessions over the past 3 months. So what this graph here is showing is the dark orange is the number of sessions and the dark blue is the number of instances of idle fees occurring. It's a tiny slither of all charge sessions. To give you an idea, that most recent week is 0.05% of all sessions where an idle fee is applied. And I think what this represents from my perspective is that despite a growth in charge sessions, we have not observed a growth in instances of idle fees occurring relative to sessions. And that goes back to what we were saying before about future-proofing our network. We've got a real case study here of massive growth, 3 times growth in sessions over a 3-month period, and idle fees haven't actually gone up with the sessions, which is a really positive sign, and I think does reinforce that idle fees are a method to prevent park time increasing alongside growth in sessions on a network.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing results. We've seen some super positive results from overstays and park time. How did we go about understanding the experience or importance of idle fees from drivers themselves? I know, Sandra, you had a lot of anecdotes here and a lot of data to support some of this stuff. So I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure we understand the customer needs and sometimes struggle as well. As I say, particularly in WA, where it's a massive state, we have really non-charging infrastructure at this stage. So this WAV network was really to create the spine of charging infrastructure to be able to travel around Western Australia. So we really wanted to assess what were the needs, and for that we created a survey in May 2023 via AEVA, so the Australian EV Association, as well as Tesla Owners Club of Western Australia. So we had about 900 people that we asked what they think about idle fee, would they like idle fee, what kind of idle fee, like what charge they are thinking of, what the grace period they think will be best for Western Australia. And so we had half of the people that answered, 478 responses. And which was quite incredible is that 91% of the people that answered this survey felt positive about idle fees. And even more in WA, 90% of them wanted idle fee on every DC charges, whatever the network. So that was a massive response. We were really happy because it really meant for us that we were providing a solution to a problem where that the drivers were really expressing. So they are the one as well that determines the $1 per minute. And the reason why they wanted $1 per minute instead of a kilowatt charge and things like that, it's because it's much simpler. They're already used to it with Tesla superchargers, so they find it was just really easy to remember what it is. And the 10 minutes grace period is mainly because we are regional. Most of our chargers, as you have seen, they are all the way Western Australia. We have only one in metropolitan area. So sometimes the charger is not just next to the cafe or next to the facilities. So it's great, as Matt said before, the idea is not to make revenue out of the idle fee. It's just to avoid overstay. So we wanted to make sure that we provide enough time for the drivers when they receive the push notification to come back to their car, unplug and keep their journey. So they felt heard and taken into account thanks to the survey and the implementation in July of the idle fee. And the great thing is that because the WAV network was still very, very young, I think in July we had like 3 fast chargers at this stage when we implemented the idle fee. So every time we are installing a new charger, then the idle fee applies. So the education is given from the first go, which is really great because people just used to it. So they don't even ask themselves about idle fee. For them, it's just normal now in WA, which is awesome. So we had only very positive feedback in the media, but also through the EV community. We are very close to the EV community here in WA, and they are very part of the WAV network project. They come to every commissioning, and we always have, in general, that's quite crazy, but EV drivers here know about my charger before I do. So they take pictures of the charger being installed before I'm even on the site. So it's a very lovely community, and we work along really well. And what one anecdote that is quite funny is one of our customer, Roy, that lives in Merredin, which is a new route that opens to Kalgoorlie. So there was no charger at all in this area. And he helped us. He voted yes for the idle fee in Western Australia, and he helped us to commission the charger. And yet 2 days later, he even put a sticker on the cable. And yet 2 days later, he went for a coffee with an old mate, and he forgot about the idle fee, and he didn't look at his phone, and he received all the notification and get back, I think, 19 minutes after the grace period. So he's telling this story to everyone, laughing and saying, look, that's great because I paid $90 because I was 19 minutes late and so on, but this will have happened once. It won't happen twice, and it's awesome that it is happening. So I think people are really, really positive about it. They wanted it and they have it. So it's fantastic. It works really well for the WAV network. In average, the park time is only 2 minutes. Over 4,000 sessions so far on the Swiss, so on Synergy service area, since April on 14 DC charges. So that shows that idle fee is working really well for our network.
Yeah. And Matt, what about you? Like any sentiments on our side that we heard from our drivers?
Yeah, so the sentiments we heard on the Chargefox side were very similar to what Sandra just shared. We sent out a driver survey of our own to around 100 drivers during the trial, just asking them about their overall experience. As I touched on earlier, we wanted to make sure this didn't make the experience any worse than, or any, have any kind of adverse impact on the experience for our drivers. And there's 2 things I wanted to call out from the results here. Firstly, over time, we observed people becoming more and more aware of this feature. So initially, we heard that drivers went across the feature and they were kind of like unfamiliar with idle fees in some cases. But over time, almost all drivers who responded to the survey said, yes, I've seen the sticker, or yes, I've seen the app information, or yes, I've heard about it through somebody else in my network. So the great thing is organically over time, we've been able to communicate this new feature to drivers, and now it's kind of understood as something that's at all the WAEV network stations as kind of a standard, which is really good. And secondly, I think just again to reinforce what Sandra said, the large majority of drivers welcome the feature, as reflected by some of the quotes on this slide. And you may have seen some positive media attention we received about this on Drive and other publications, as well as on public social media posts and pages from the driver community. So it was really well received from our drivers. And around 80% of drivers who responded to the survey said that they felt that idle fees were very likely to discourage what they perceive to be poor behavior, being overstays on the public charging network. And I think our biggest takeaway from talking to drivers about this was it reinforced the point that drivers perceive overstays as a problem or will be a problem. And they want to see site hosts and software providers like Chargefox and Synergy taking action to prevent overstays to ensure the experience on the public network continues to be great and isn't negatively impacted by overstays in future.
Yeah, I think it's so exciting to see how idle fees has had such a meaningful impact on the driver experience and
Absolutely.
charger usage and availability. Matt, can you share how our audience can get access to idle fees or be part of our trial?
Yeah, absolutely. So we'd love to hear from you if you're interested in idle fees. We'll be sending an expression of interest form in the chat shortly. In that form, there'll be some next steps and some information we'll need from you just to get in touch. And once we do that, we'll reach out to you and provide some more information about this feature and answer any questions you may have outside of this webinar.
Yeah, and if you're not ready to do the form, we'll also send it in a recap email at the end in a couple of days as well. Alrighty, moving on to questions. We've had some really great ones come through. I might just allow us a little bit more time for any more questions to come through. So feel free to add your questions into the Q&A. I'll do a couple follow-up questions just while we wait for that. So Matt, why did we choose to focus on DC charges and not AC?
Yeah, so great question. I think in terms of why we focused on DC initially was to meet Synergy's needs to some degree because they're rolling out a DC network. And I think the second reason as well why it was a priority for us is because, as I said at the very beginning, overstays typically are the most hard-felt problem on those stations where people should just be topping up and moving on. So we wanted to make sure that that was our primary kind of focus initially. There's also a technical kind of consideration that I won't go into too much depth here around how DC and AC communicates with our software that made AC significantly more complex. So we will consider potentially looking at AC again in the future, but at the moment it's just DC stations.
Nice, thanks so much. All right, we've got Rohan, I hope I pronounced that correctly. Is Chargefox considering advanced reservation technology or has it already been implemented?
So we have considered in the past. We haven't got anything implemented at the moment. We don't have anything on our roadmap at this stage to introduce reservations into our product, but take your feedback on board.
Yeah. We've got an anonymous one. Are idle fees optional to introduce?
Yes, so we're not forcing our customers to do this if they don't want it. It's an opt-in feature at this stage. I will be transparent and say that we think it's in the best interests of all of our customers to consider idle fees, particularly if you've got a journey fast charge where people should just be topping up. But certainly we're not going to force anyone to do it if it's not right for your customers.
Another anonymous. Who is the beneficiary of idle fees? Is it Chargefox or the CPO?
Yep. So currently, idle fees, 100% of idle fees are dispersed to the CPO. So we're not taking any cut from the idle fee amount at the moment, but that may change in future depending on what works for us from a commercial perspective. And just for everyone's sake, charge point operator is what CPO stands for. So if you own a charger, that applies to you.
Cool, Rohan. A scenario where there is 1 hour parking limit, example, Mandurah RAC EV station. It is important to convey message clearly to drivers. Worst case, they may be fined for overstay and also get charged for idle fee.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think around the... Sorry, I'm going to take this step. That's okay. It's something we've considered before as well. Like, what do you do if you've got parking signs as well as idle fees? With WAEV, as far as I'm aware, Sandra can correct me, there is no case of that. So that keeps it pretty simple. I think in terms of cancels, I think in working with cancels, that's where we need to have that conversation. Is idle fees the right solution for you? I agree that it could be confusing for drivers if there's a parking sign and a idle fee charge. We'll do our best to provide really clear information to drivers around how idle fees work and how they apply to avoid confusion. But certainly hear where you're coming from there, Rohan, in terms of how do we balance a parking limit with a idle fee model at the same time.
Sandra, did you have anything to add to that scenario?
Yeah, I think Mandurah, it's the same in UWA in Perth Metropolitan. You're right. I think, Rojan, that the idea at start, because there was no idle fee option, I think some councils were putting a parking limit because that was the only way to avoid people to park on the EV bay for 12 hours because often it's a prime parking as well. But yeah, on the WAV network, we don't have this kind of issue because we are very regional. So there is no such thing as limit parking. But that will be a conversation to have with each location that are already existing. If they are implementing idle fee, I think they shouldn't have a parking limit as well.
Thanks, Sandra. From Ben, so will there be provision for differing penalties, idle fees, depending on the charger popularity? E.g., a station that gets heavily used may require a greater disincentive than one that spends lots of time available.
At this stage, no. So I'm not sure if you're specifically alluding to how Tesla superchargers work, where there's a utilization metric they can track to say how many particular plugs are busy at a particular time, and then charge fees based on that. We don't have that in our plans at the moment. It's potentially quite complex to implement, but given customer feedback and how idle fees go more broadly across our network, we might change our approach in the future.
Thanks, Ben, for the question. Rohan, again, what sort of information campaign is being planned? Will there be any information on site, signboard?
Yeah, I can take the signage side of things, but I think for Sandra, it'd be good for you to jump in and talk about when you spoke to people before. We rolled out idle fees as well, if you don't mind. So yeah, just from a signage perspective, as I mentioned before, we've got stickers on the cables to communicate to drivers that idle fees apply at that station, and that was specifically just in case someone didn't look at the app or didn't use the app to let them know. And in terms of information campaigns, like Sandra, I think you told me a bit about some of the Tesla Owner Club meetings you went to and stuff like that. Did you want to elaborate on that at all?
Yeah, so as I said before, the WAV community is very, very tight, and they create like a monthly meeting through AEVA, as well as Tokwa, who is doing a Ask Us Anything session online every Wednesday night. So I come online at least once per month. And so before we implemented the idle fee, obviously, I did a bit of an update on the project, and I talked about the idle fee. When we implemented the idle fee, I came back. So I come to give this information about at least once per month. Plus, they receive an email to all the TOCWA members, which is 700 in WA, and the AVA member, which are about 213 from memory. So that they receive a lot of information regarding the WAV network, which include idle fee as well. And you have the sticker on the cable. So each time you come to a WAV network charger, the DC chargers on the cable, you have the stickers that Matt showed before, as well as you have push notification if you are using the app as well. So, and if you go on PlugShare, which is the most used platform, at least in Western Australia, we use PlugShare a lot to verify if the charger is working and things like that. There is also information talking about idle fee.
Amazing. Thanks, Sandra. Oliver, can idle fees be introduced when there is no cost to charge? What about for private chargers?
Yeah, there's no reason technically why we can't do that. We can turn it on for a charger where there's no fee. So yes, we can do that. Private chargers, again, we can do it. I think would be keen to have a chat with you about that use case. When we built this with the intention of being for public chargers, but talking purely in technical terms alone, there's no reason why we couldn't do that. Both of those things.
Oh. Any more questions? Yep. Matt, wondering if there is any thought given to frequent overstay customers, emails, notification, flag in the APP. How could behavior be changed?
And just to be clear, this isn't myself asking me a question. I'm not putting myself questions here. Thanks, Matt, for the question. Yeah, so I guess in terms of what we've been observing in the data, there haven't been many repeat offenders. So I think there's maybe been one instance that was just happened this past weekend. Prior to that, I haven't seen someone doing it twice at the same station, or at least not on the same station. So I think absolutely there's an opportunity to reinforce information and ensure drivers are aware of it. We did put together public-facing documentation in our help centre and other places to ensure that there's a resource available to drivers all the time around where idle fees apply and things like that. I think until we really get to a critical mass of growth on stations with idle fees, where we need to potentially address repeat offenders more kind of rigorously and actually like engage people more often. Right now, from what I've been observing in the data, at least, we're not seeing the same person, being charged with idle fees 4 or 5 or 6 times. So to me, that's a positive thing. It shows that the people are getting the message the first time, hopefully, and not doing it a second time. So yeah, I think that's a really positive thing that's occurred, and I don't see any real need to change our communication strategy too much at this stage.
Yeah. We've got a question from Chris, which is similar to the question I asked you, but maybe just to reinforce, can we do it on AC and DC chargers?
Yep. So at this stage, it's just DC charges. So we just to reiterate what I said before, there's some technical considerations to that we need to be mindful of in terms of how we actually might implement that. And there's also some considerations around whether that's the right thing to do. Should we be charging an ARTA feed a 7 kilowatt charger in a shopping centre car park? Maybe, maybe not. So that's where working with customers like yourselves will be really important to understand the use cases around why AC chargers and ARTA feeds are important. And then we'll have to obviously figure out how to do the technical side of things depending on how important it is to you.
We really want to thank Sandra for her time today. We're super grateful. Sandra, I don't know if you had any closing remarks or anything like that you wanted to share before we close out in terms of just key lessons from your end.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Being an EV driver myself, for me, it's a no-brainer. And I hate when I'm behind someone that is not even charging. There is nothing more frustrating. So imagine if you are lost in the middle of nowhere. It's just too frustrating. So we have a tool that we can use. So why not doing it? Particularly when 90% of people want it. There's really no much question to ask ourselves. So yeah, I'm really happy that we have implemented this on the WAV network. And feel free, if you have any question or comments, feel free to reach out directly to me. I'm always happy to talk about EV. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Sandra. Thank you, everyone, for making the time to attend. We're so grateful you could be here. It's our first webinar, so hopefully of many to come, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much.